Good afternoon, everyone. I feel a bit awkward to break up your conversation nicely going on, but it's time. Therefore, keeping up a good tradition of, I would say, the maritime sector. Starting on time, finishing on time, I would like to start. And oh, I thought they were.
Get offended.
Please stay,
Yes.
please.
Well,
We'll give you a good time.
yes, we will not be deterred. Yes?
But more coming.
Yes, the tide will come. Yes. Thank you for your positive encouragement. My name's greetings. My name is Shingo Miyake. I am labor law and international labor standards specialist of International Labor Organization based in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. So why am I here? Why am I here from Trinidad, and why am I here, from an international labor organization? Well, and moderating this session. Well, that's because we are here to discuss social aspect of supply chain. So what are they? So we're going to discuss decent work, and we're going to focus on the maritime sectors, especially the seafarers. And we have a specific time frame in mind, that is the COVID period, so roughly between 2020 and 23. And over 80% of the world's international trade is transported by sea. And this fact alone illustrates how indispensable seafarers are in global supply chains. They drive, quite literally, sea trade, and they are thus essential actors in global supply chains. It is also true that seafarers are invisible from eyes of those, or most of us, living land-based. They work on the sea, far from our places of living. They work on confined vessels for months. Their ships are their places of both working and living. Therefore, their ships must be equipped for both purposes. Seafarers live and work in a particular environment. Against this background, the ILO has been working on the protection of seafarers early since its establishment in 1919. The first instrument on seafarers was adopted in 1920, and that in the second year since the establishment of the ILO. That instrument was Convention number 1 on minimum age of seafarers. And since then, numerous instruments have been adopted to better protect seafarers and promote a sound maritime sector. These efforts culminated in the adoption in 2006 of the Maritime Labour Convention, or the MLC. This instrument consolidated and modernized most of the maritime instruments of the ILO. And the MLC is also known as the Bill of Rights for seafarers. Our meeting today is to discuss how the MLC has been protecting seafarers and protecting a level playing field for ship owners. In doing so, we bear in mind a recent COVID-19 period, which has posed on us particular difficulties on seafarers, ship owners, and governments. And on this topic, I'm pleased to announce that we have eminent panelists together with us. Starting immediately on my right, Mr. Fabrizio Barcelona. seafarers and inland navigation section coordinator of International Transport Workers Federation, or ITF. And we also have Mr. Helio Vincent, Director, Employment Affairs of International Chamber of Shipping, or the ICS. Going further, Ms. Gail Anking, President, Barbados Employers Confederation. I would like to make an oral correction here that you will be seeing that unicomer on her nameplate, but she's here as a representative of Barbados Employers Confederation. She'll be speaking in that capacity as president, and so I would like to make oral correction on that. Ms. King, I apologize for that confusion. And we also have Professor Maximo Mejia Jr., President of World Maritime University. Thank you. Thank you all. And I'm going to ask 3 rounds of questions from here. Dear panelists, please share with us your insights. And then just to keep up the time, I will have to ask you to speak within certain time frame. And after 3 rounds of questions, we are going to have vibrant dialogue between the panelists and the floor. I certainly look forward to that. All right. So without further ado, let us start with the first round of questions, dear panelists. The MLC has been in force for more than 10 years now. From your different perspectives, could you please share your views as to the added value of the MLC to protect seafarers' rights and to ensure level playing field of ship owners worldwide? So I would like to start with Fabrizio. May I continue with the first name based? Yes. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Shingo, therefore, by the way. Yes, then Fabrizio, 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Shingo, and good day to you all. You have been the bravest of the brave to come this late time after all session since yesterday. So thank you, and I guess this one is going to be like almost one-to-one session. So we're looking forward to have your contribution, as Shingo has indicated. Yes, I think that considering thinking about 10 years since the Maritime Labour Convention was into force is a kind of a milestone. No one thought when the Maritime Labour Convention was entered into force in 2013 what to expect. Certainly it's a formidable instrument that is designed for shipping but around the seafarers. This is very important. And of course the extension of the protection to all seafarers, including those that before the Maritime Labour Convention were not considered seafarers, has been a great achievement. Then if you look at the provision of the Maritime Labour Convention and the concept of the continuous improvement is quite fundamental, because it is able not only to address issue of the industry, the changing industry, but also to anticipate trend, and through the amendment mechanism also to put the convention always in the actual place of what is happening in maritime, looking at the new generation of the seafarers, looking at the structural issues that has kept women away from this industry for far too long. Certainly not alone. The Maritime Labour Convention will not be able to resolve all the issues, but I repeat, it is an instrument that is unique. Unique because is the synthesis, the negotiation between the tripartite system represented by government, ship owner, and the seafarers representative. I think that we have been working together reasonably well. We still have differences. We are not hiding behind those differences, but when we meet in Geneva every 2.5 years to look how the convention can be improved, we manage more or less to leave the house of the ILO all satisfied that we have done our job. And I think that it's also important to highlight, that is my personal opinion, that because of the enforcement mechanism, the work of a port state control, the work of a flag states control, the MLC has managed to, through the years, to put away those ship owners that were working on the standard that were below what was expected. And that goes in favor of the good ship owner that are represented here by the ICS that always have to compete unfairly because of the cost cutting and the non-abidance to regulation. Certainly I can mention that provision like the length of contract that now has been defined, the medical care, which is one of the latest amendments that ensure that every seafarers have access to medical care, access to social media, thinking about the future generation of seafarers, training, food and catering, paid leaves were not something that the seafarers need to assume was a given. Actually, is the result of a year of negotiation between the parties. Each one of those have their reason for opposing or trying to change in the convention. But the end result is that the seafarers are better off today than before the MLC was in place.
Could you wrap up, please?
And with this, I think that I will leave my colleague to continue with their perspective, and I'll be back with the next round of questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I really hate this part of my job, but I will, just to keep plenty of time, I will give you a signal when you have 1 minute left. Yes. Helio, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hard to follow Fab. He's been very candid about shipping and the status of the MLC. For those who are not familiar with the International Chamber of Shipping, we're the global trade association for ship owners and operators, and we represent ship owner employers at the ILO with respect to the work that is done within the context of the Maritime Labour Convention. But for those that aren't that familiar with ILO and how it functions, it's one of the most fascinating and probably unique roles within the UN family, because you've got a tripartite structure where you have the government sitting in the middle, you've got the ship owner employers sitting on one side, and then you've got the seafarers sitting on the other side. Both sides, all three sides with voting rights, and it really is quite something to see this very unique structure. And Shingo mentioned one of the things about the MLC before it came into effect was the fact that there were numerous conventions that governed the working and living conditions of seafarers before the adoption of the MLC, which in 2006, and it subsequent entered into force in 2016. In 2013, sorry, excuse me. But I want to quantify the numerous that Shingo mentioned in his opening remarks. That was actually 69 separate maritime labor standards. 69 all brought together into one document to serve as the single authoritative document for the working and living conditions of seafarers on board. This was a pretty grueling task, but I think as ship owners and seafarers and the government, and indeed the ILO Secretariat, Shingo and the team in Geneva, should all be very proud of this unique document that we were able to agree, and Fab pointed to some of the, apologies for referring to Fabrizio's Fab, too over familiar, but Fabrizio already mentioned some of the key elements that have been agreed within the MLC. But here I should point to, other things like training and qualifications in order to be able to work on board, seafarers' employment agreements. All of these different areas are covered within the MLC. Since it entered into force in 2013, it's been amended 4 times. We will be going to Geneva again in 2015 to amend it yet again, to continuously make sure that we're doing right by our seafarers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to hear just these 2 panelists for this question. What I heard just quite quickly was this. First of all, the added value of the MLC. That was the question, and that was first of all, it's a dynamic document consolidating 69 existing instruments into one. So that work alone, it's a dynamic process. And it was a massive collaborative process, as Helio illustrated. It's done by all stakeholders of the industry, which resulted in some uniqueness, as Fabrizio illustrated. It's a consolidated instruments, and therefore it provides a synthesis of. It provides a package of protection of seafarers and also supportive mechanism and procedures for seafarers, ship owners, and of course a clear set of rights and duties for government. And that dynamic instrument, however, was not set in stone. It was amended already 4 times. So it's a dynamic document. So that's what we heard quickly. So let us now go to the second round of questions. For the ILO, the MLC is a success story in view of its ratification rate, its overall implementation worldwide, and its capacity to adapt, as we discussed, to the evolving needs of the sector. However, the COVID posed a tremendous challenge for its implementation and the protection of seafarers' rights. In this context, we witnessed unprecedented international social dialogue and cooperation among ship owners, seafarers, governments, and also UN agencies, and all together. And that happened to find solutions. Could you tell us more about the challenge that you face in each of your respective capacities and the measures adopted to overcome them? And here, I would like to ask a specific question addressed to Max. We know that his institution, World Maritime University, conducted important research on the impact of the COVID pandemic on seafarers. What will be the salient measures you would like to share? So, colleagues, please share your thoughts in 2 minutes. And I would like to start with Max, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shingo, and good afternoon, everyone. See how much I can pack in 2 minutes. We did conduct some studies on the effects of COVID, the impact on work and life aboard ship, particularly looking at mental health and exhaustion. Now, what we found was a great deal of discomfort relating to crew change and also the lack of access to the port. And this has had an effect on how they see seafaring as a career, created some social tension in the interaction on board ship, problems with access to supplies, and feeling of being unsafe in port because there was a lot of blame that was being put on some seafarers. Of course, there was fatigue. There was lack of information that was being made available to seafarers. In fact, around 50% of seafarers felt they weren't getting the support that they needed, whether it was from the company, from the family, communications, access to communications, and all of that. 40% were
1 minute.
reported to be depressed many times during the week. 50% felt a great deal of anxiety most of the time. There was a feeling of helplessness and exhaustion all around. What they really wanted to see was protective measures, healthcare, access to repatriation at the end of their contracts, adequate supplies, and risk mitigation for fatigue. Now, of course, many of these have come out of frustration over the situation. This was facilitated in a way by the exigency of having to, in a way, put on hold the international standards that are available to protect them under the MLC. So really, our seafarers are real heroes. Because of them, trade continued. We received our food, we got our energy, our fuel, and life, in a way, within the context of COVID, continued. What's worrying, of course, is sometimes there's still the pandemic mode that's prevailing in some areas of shipping. We cannot let up. We have to take the lessons from the COVID times, and Fabrizio mentioned the amendments. We need to look at them carefully, make sure the proper amendments are put in place. Agencies need to talk to each other. Member states need to talk to each other. There must be continued social dialogue. International organizations, ILO, IMO, WHO, and of course, at the World Maritime University, we do what we can in terms of capacity development and in supporting the MLC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Max. So let us go to Fabrizio. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Shingo. Just we are talking about COVID, I think that I will start actually giving some numbers. During the year and a half since everything started, I believe it was March 2020, more than 645 meetings took place between the social partner, the Secretariat of the ILO and the Secretariat of the IMO. As a result of the request from the social partner, the ILO made 75 direct requests to government to address the issue and of the seafarers stranded on board, and 95 were made by the Secretariat of the IMO. We also ran a high ministerial summit organized under the patronage of both the IMO and ILO. Just to say that no one was prepared to see COVID coming, but we quickly react, and as a social partner, they got together on the basis that we agree on what we agree, and we continue to disagree on what we disagree. For the benefit of the seafarers and shipping, we have a dramatic situation. We didn't know how to respond. I think that we managed after 2 years to repatriate more than 600 seafarers of Kiribati that were stranded in Europe, Australia, South Africa. It took 2 years of continuous work by the IMO and ILO Secretariat and the social partner to convince the government to take back their own seafarers. That was not the only example. We can mention when there was a company that hired a plane with 300 seafarers to be returned home, and while the plane was literally on the tarmac to take off, that government called Italy, where the seafarers were stranded, and refused the takeoff permission. So those seafarers have to be returned back on board of ships and first aid center. So the situation was dramatic. We have had a bit of frustration, and I'm frank and open here, because we have on one hand the IMO and ILO, that they did everything possible to facilitate the work of the social partner and the seafarers, while the WHO, which have been turned to assist us with some assistance to ensure the seafarers could go and leave ships, were not so receptive. So something that we are trying to address now, having more direct contact with WHO in preparedness is should another situation like COVID occur. And I think that is something unimaginable what happened, that the social partner working together, not only the ITF and ICS, but also other organizations that represent seafarers, mission to seafarers. A lot of people that have an interest in seafarers work so much together that the message arrived directly to the UN Secretary General, that for the first time mentioned the seafarers as key workers. And ever since, we have built on the ability to reach the maximum authority of the United Nations system. And we are quite pleased that because of the insistence of a social partner, there was a direct request from the UN Secretary General to look at what went wrong during COVID, and also why the provision of the MLC that are very balanced and perfect to assist seafarers were not implemented by the signatory country. That resulted in interagency task force that I think that has come to a conclusion with some proposal on how to make the situation better and the interaction between agencies better should another occasion like COVID happen again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fabrizio. Helio, please.
Thank you, Shingo. And worth noting as well, just building on some of the good points that Max has made, that in 2022, ICS also worked alongside the Hamburg School of Business and Administration on a particular project with respect to the impact of COVID-19 on shipping, seafarers, and maritime labor markets, really as a way of lessons learned and the practical solutions that could be implemented in the future. One thing that we found in our research, and I think it's been gleaned through the previous comments as well, was really that lack of balance between the existing WHO regulations, in this case the international health regulations, and those requirements prescribed in the MLC to protect the well-being and overall health of seafarers. So that is one thing that we found that was really, really lacking. Uncoordinated approaches in terms of the way ships coming into port and the handling of seafarers as well was very varied, without much clarity for the most part, and that created issues as well. But we are happy to note that as a result of this research, we were able to really feed into the task force that Fabrizio mentioned, that brought together all the relevant stakeholders. So ICS on the employer side, we had ITF on the seafarers and transport worker side more generally, we had the International Maritime Organization, we had the International Labour Organization, and importantly, as Fabrizio mentioned, we needed to work much more closely with the WHO. So WHO was also part of this joint task force that we created to really learn the lessons that we needed to learn from COVID. There was then an agreement, the issuance of some recommendations, both by IMO and by ILO, about how we take this forward, as Fab has mentioned. But what I would like to say is, ultimately, it sounds all very doom and gloom. But, and I really don't want the discussion to be just about this, because at the end of the day, we are trying to, in a way, celebrate the MLC. So there's a lot of work to do, but at the same time, shipping is a wonderful career. We've got a lot of work to do, and we tackle those head on. Like Fabrizio mentioned, we won't always agree on all of the details, but this is a fascinating career. This is a fascinating industry for us to be in, and as long as we keep learning the lessons from the past, and I think we're not unique in saying that we need to learn a lot of lessons from the pandemic. I think probably most industries can say the same thing. But here's one example of how we are learning. So, and Fabrizio alluded to this, in terms of working much more closely with the World Health Organization, you may be aware that they are currently, right now, working on a new pandemic convention. This is an all-encompassing international convention to govern any future pandemic, right? This is expected to be agreed, I think, next week. And a lot of the time, we have spent liaising with IMO, with ILO especially, and some governments, to make sure that seafarers and other transport workers are reflected in this new WHO international instrument. Now, this international instrument, as you can imagine, given its importance, it's got all sorts of different interests from different countries coming together into one process. But one thing that we are very, very happy to note is that there is now a reference to the need to ensure that seafarers specifically and transport workers more generally are protected should there be another pandemic in the future. So that sort of, we've learned the lesson. Let's hope that with the next pandemic we are fully and much better prepared to take it head on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just quickly summarizing what we heard. I hope that, of course, I believe you were paying attention to what each panelist was saying, but also what impressed me was that how they are presenting themselves. Because as I understood from the interventions, COVID was, of course, a medical emergency to all of us. But and that's true to the maritime sector. But also it was a human issue. As Max presented initially, we observed mental health issues. We observed fatigue. And of course, the seafarers themselves were victims of COVID pandemic. So that was obvious at the global level. And therefore, all the actors represented by the panelists kicked in, so the industry organizations such as Helios one, and then workers' organization such as Fabrizio's one, they worked, of course. They played their respective roles, but also they collaborated. And they collaborated each other to address other actors, such as government. Helio mentioned that ICS convinced the governments. And the ILO, for instance, and IMO, and WHO for this matter, provided venue and the channel of voicing their concerns. So there was a very, so I said with respect to the first question, MLC was a dynamic document, but its functioning was also dynamic, and that was very clearly manifested during the COVID period. Okay, so let us go to the third round of questions, and then we are going to have a little twist in our focus. So we have been talking through two rounds of questions, global issues, with particular attention to COVID. And let us bring in some regional, and of course, in this case, Caribbean perspective to our discussion. And also, let's focus, because we focus on Caribbean, let's focus on cruise industry. Because we are in a region where cruise ships constitute a key sector, employing a very high number of seafarers. Some cruise ships have as many as 2,000 seafarers on board. And here, this number may sound rather high, but that's because the MLC defines seafarers in a rather broad way. Not just those in uniform. They are, of course, seafarers, but under the MLC, for instance, hairdressers, dancers, singers, they are also considered seafarers, given certain conditions. So we would like to hear panelists, but for this question, Gail, I have a specific question for you. In this context, we would like to hear more about the challenges and opportunities regarding the protection of seafarers, in particular in the cruise sector in the Caribbean countries. And also I have a specific question for Max, please. Taking into account that women represent around 30% of the workforce on board cruise ships, again, we have to be mindful of the definition of seafarers, yes? It's wider than we conventionally portray. Could you highlight some of the specific challenges faced by women and some of the measures the WMU and IMO have taken to promote women seafarers? So let us start with Gail's intervention, please.
Thank you, Shingo. Let me first of all begin by acknowledging the fact that the MLC does establish global standards for a global industry in a situation where a number of seafarers don't necessarily have access to representation or local representation and are not necessarily guided by national laws. So I think that that's a major move in terms of establishing best practice or good employment practices on the oceans. And whilst it was tested during COVID, I think it gave us the opportunity to see where we could go and what we needed to fix in the process. For the Caribbean, we know that we have around 40% of the global passenger capacity for cruise ships. And we, however, know that we don't necessarily have that same level of representation in terms of seafarers on board. And whilst that's the case, during the COVID period, we still experienced a number of the same issues with regards to crew rotations, extended contracts, and persons being accepted back into their own states at a point in time. I think countries such as Barbados would have had a very positive effect on during the pandemic, where we opened our shores to seafarers to seek and to get some relief, so that's a plus. Most of the Caribbean islands actually rely heavily on tourism. And for some countries such as Aruba, Antigua, and Barbuda, it represents about 94% of their GDP. Why that's a significant number is it says to us that in terms of livelihood, it is important for us to really focus in on the seafaring aspect, but as a country and as a region especially, where we now have a stronger focus on the blue economy, it becomes an even more significant element. So I just wanted to put a slightly different spin on it because, yes, we do have seafarers. Let me make that clear because we have people in the entertainment industry, the hospitality areas, etc. But we, as a blue economy, we also have a significant role to play in terms of engaging with seafarers when they land and at our ports. As a port state, it becomes very critical how we treat with it. The Caribbean in general employs about double digits, I think around 30% in the territories. Whilst we can't distill a number that includes tourism, again, that's still very significant. Based on the experiences with COVID as a challenge, what we did see is that a number of tourism-dependent employees retreated into the informal sector. And I know that that's always a concern for society as a whole and for economic drivers in general. And so persons utilize the skills they had gained on board, such as pastry making, et cetera, and they started up their own businesses. And that impacts economies because we don't necessarily reap the benefits in terms of contributions to NIS, et cetera, that becomes necessary. Additionally, coming out of the pandemic, we've heard a lot of ship owners speak to the fact that in terms of recruiting for seafarers, they also want to look at other markets that were not perhaps as strong, such as South Africa. And it is important for the Caribbean at this stage to keep pace then with global standards in order to provide necessary training and certification so that we can showcase the talent that we have, and more so to empower the industry here to keep pace with the rest of the world, and because it's a significant aspect of livelihood. I think it's important at this stage, and I think I was chatting with Fabrizio at the beginning, that we don't necessarily have a centralized organization which represents seafarers in this region, and I think that's an opportunity for the Caribbean cruise community to have a program and the necessary funding to assist Caribbean nationals who are desirous of working in cruise ships to come up to the necessary standards through the provision of necessary training. But I think there's also that in turn can act as a recruiting agency for the Caribbean, because most of the recruiting agencies at present actually exist externally to the Caribbean region. So we can, by way of having that, we have the opportunity to enforce and negotiate terms and conditions for Caribbean seafarers, and I think that's going to be critical going forward. And it creates a space to have their voices heard and for us to understand any issues that might be unique to them, or generally any issues which they might be confronted with, and giving us that awareness and opportunity to find solutions both in the long term and the short term. I know, as Max spoke to earlier, when we think of the blue economy, because it's such a significant element of how we ourselves growing on this side of the hemisphere, we want our young professionals to see seafaring as a viable career. And that means that we need to be able to showcase the work done by seafarers to attract people to the industry. I think what is very beneficial for us as we project into the future is that there is projected to be a lot of onshore opportunities associated with seafaring. And so on this side of the world, in terms of the Caribbean, it's important that we do not only focus then on traditional jobs and traditional roles, but we identify key areas of human development in terms of our planning, as well as STEM programs that will provide opportunities for employment in our region in seafaring. And I think a lot of this as well will be closely connected with wider strategic goals which we have as a region, such as protecting our marine environment in terms of engineering and some other elements that we have not necessarily dabbled in to the extent that we should.
Thank you very much. Yes, Max, please.
Thank you, Shingo. The barriers to gender equality in the shipping and maritime industry are numerous. Of course, there's cultural barriers, legal policy barriers, training, employment, retention barriers, leadership barriers. What we are most interested in at the World Maritime University naturally relates to education and training. And if we look at the interest in seafaring, particularly in Europe, there are only 13.5% women in deck officer programs and 6.3% women in marine engineering programs. When you go to the developing world, it's even lower. We're looking at less than 1% women in nautical and marine engineering programs. And I think This also goes back to something that, that Gail has pointed out earlier, and that is we need to look at seafaring and the maritime industry in a larger context, because otherwise women or girls are only exposed to the traditional view of seafaring. As far as IMO or WMU are concerned, I mean, WMU follows the lead of IMO as an institution in terms of promoting diversity in gender and culture, etc. But just to share with you what the World Maritime University has done, until the early 2000s, we only had one woman professor on faculty. Today, 30% of WMU faculty are women. We have 2 full professors, 3 associate professors, 3 assistant professors, and 3 lecturers. And we are promoting the employment of women in all levels of staff recruitment. In terms of enrollment of students, in 1983, when we were established, we had only 3% women. Now, last year, we graduated 38% women. This year, the enrollment is 40%, so really moving forward in that regard. And aside from that, what we also do together with our students is provide a platform for networking of women in maritime. We promote the WMU Women's Association, where they're able to support each other, they're able to mentor potential and prospective students, and we encourage them to, when they go back to their home countries, organize women in maritime associations, and even lead those associations, and even lead their organizations, and aim for executive positions when they go back to their home countries. Really to inspire women to play an active role in the maritime industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Max. Now let us hear from Fabrizio. Please. Thank you.
Thank you again. And then, you know, when I think about the Caribbean in the context of the cruise and the MLC, I was about to say a word that probably is not appropriate for this audience, but it really depressed me, because I spent 4 years of my career at sea around this island, and so I enjoyed the sun, certainly the beach, but also appreciate the people and the skills and the way you look at life. And when you consider that behind Europe, this region in percentage has the highest concentration of the MLC ratification, is something that needs to make you think why not yet happen a serious conversation to take advantage of the fact that most of the ships, cruise vessels coming here are covered by a flag from this region, and why there are not yet a serious conversation how to gain access for workers in this region. I think that if you look at the MLC provisions, the continuous let's say consultation between government, in this case the flag states, the trade union movement, and the ship owner movement, is a continuous conversation. It doesn't end when the Maritime Labour Convention is ratified. Continue through the process, and that will be a missed opportunity. Certainly, I believe that you'll never reach the stage where the Philippines are, that with 300,000 more seafarers, they bring back every year something in the region of 6.5 billion to boost the Philippine economy. The numbers here will be much lower, but the opportunity is there. The opportunity is there for you to grab, to have, to act as a system, not as individual island, because I think it's that what the cruise industry count. Come in an island, offer something, take something, and move on. if you can use the opportunity to use, you know, the opportunity given and then work toward increase the number of seafarers working on board the ship will be a good return, because working on board of a ship improve certainly the skills. So you'll have back skillful personnel that in the sense of the career path will start to work on board of a cruise vessel, acquire additional skills, and then those skills can be employed ashore. That for the benefit of the economy. So it is something that really has always been something that I wanted to say, and this opportunity having this forum in the Caribbean is the opportunity, and I'm really looking forward. And I know that the ILO is behind, behind you, behind the Caribbean, should you decide to have a more structure, activity around how to ensure that there is the conversation between government, employer and employee, and the cruise industry to progress this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Helio, please.
Yeah, just an interesting point, Shingo. You mentioned the difference in how you define seafarers, and that which has an impact on numbers, obviously. So in terms of women, for example, if we measure the number of women on board ships based on the IMO's definition, or certainly STCW certification through IMO training, that's 2%. If we look at it from an MLC perspective, it's 7.5. Just an interesting point to make there. Either way, it's still a long way to go, really. It's still single digits. It's still, so we've got a long way to go either way, but I thought that would be interesting. And to Gail's point about seafaring in the Caribbean, I think you did make excellent points. And actually, just to clarify there, actually you have nearly in Barbados 4,000 seafarers, which is sort of around the average for the Caribbean. I think Antigua and Barbuda has about 15,000, and then every other nation in the island has either, take 1,000, add 1,000 on, but it's around that mark. And the reason I say that is because there is a huge opportunity there, and I spoke about this in a panel yesterday, so I won't repeat everything I said there, but we are in a moment of considerable transformation in shipping. With decarbonization, we've got these really ambitious goals to decarbonize shipping, which of course will also be helpful for the islands here. But the profile of the seafarer is changing hugely and very fast. So we're going, and Max will know this better than anyone, the requirements and the expectations of seafarers will be very different. Long gone are the days of sort of, you need those big macho men that can pick every. No, we are very, 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 in a very, very different time, in a very different period. And that's why I was saying back then, we've got actually an exciting story to tell. So I don't want you to leave here thinking, actually, I don't know if I want my cousin or my brother or my sister to join. They absolutely should. It's fantastic. We have a lot of work to do. And certainly on diversity, that is one of them, but under the leadership of ILO and IMO, we're going to continue to work on this. And I remember quite vividly a meeting between IMO and ILO in 2019, which was convened especially to look at diversity issues. And I don't like to just talk about women. And the reason I say that is because it's important. Don't take me the wrong way. I don't want to. But if we focus on making ships, right, like anywhere else, work well for everybody, right, and that means taking into account your needs, my needs, and the needs of anybody else. regardless of their nationality, their culture, you take everything on board, and then we're talking about equity. And that, I think that is really where we need to take those conversations, where we're trying to take those conversations. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Listening to everybody, I was thinking about a phrase Helio made earlier, in earlier rounds of questions. That is, maritime is a wonderful, wonderful career. Exact words, I may be wrong, but that's what he said. And he kind of repeated now, too. Now, so this means that, and all panelists highlighted, of course, challenges. Gail mentioned the difficulties in finding people, and also needing to approach entities outside the Caribbean to find talents, for instance. And also there are several references to gender imbalance, particularly if we look at officers or engineers. The issue is glaring. And also Fabrizio mentioned even though there is a high concentration of MLC ratification, there has not been yet a serious conversation within the Caribbean about these seafarers' needs and their contributions they could make, so potentials of seafarers. So those challenges were presented, but those are also something. Those are also opportunities, because if there have not been conversation, then let's have a conversation. And Gail also mentioned there can be a proper Caribbean organizations representing Caribbean seafarers. There are things that can be done, and also, in some way, it's clear that what needs to be done. So therefore, challenges also present opportunities. So that's the sense I got from panelists talking from different perspectives. So with that, let us now have since our group grew exponentially, can we have a 5-minute conversation dialogue? Yes? Yes, great. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. A really rich and interesting panel. And I was glad you were struggling to bring forward the positives. One of the things I find fascinating about the Maritime Labour Convention, my name is Adele Blackett from McGill University, Canada Research Chair in Transnational Labour Law. One of the fascinating features is that you manage, through the consultations, through the dialogue, and the continuous improvement, to have a minimum wage for seafarers, which is unique in the world in relation to industry, right? And so that's worth underscoring. But I'm also struck by how this is not broadly known. And so I have two questions. One is about the joint agency report coming out of the pandemic and the many recommendations. And I wonder whether you would consider, on the basis of some of them, the rapid action mechanism that's put in place, the recommendations to governments, do you think the same kind of crisis for seafarers would be resolved on the basis of those recommendations? Or do we run a risk, despite those recommendations, of having the same kind of crisis again? So that's one. And then the second, noting, of course, that we're the end of the day, of the last full day of this wonderful forum, but how do we have the kind of conversation about the ILO's specificity and its contribution to global value chains in a way that enables broader constituencies to really engage with it. And I say this knowing that from day one, from the high-level discussions, there was already labor on the table. And when we were talking about global value chain resilience, we were talking about labor. The depth took us to labor, productive and non-productive sectors, if you will. But the themes that the ILO has been grappling with for a century, but also very recently, were all there. And yet, when we say decent work, it's somehow seen as a somewhat different discussion. And I wonder how we start to bridge that, because it seems that the social justice mandate is actually central to everything that's been happening here over the past 3 days.
Yes, I feel relieved because all those questions are big questions, and Helio has immediate response. Thank you, Helio, please.
Yeah, a lot to unpack in those, but really, really all very interesting questions. I think the simplest answer is shipping is very, very, very invisible, and that is just the reality of it. So people don't really take on the ships, let alone those who are inside the ships. They just care about, well, my goods arrived. And that is the reality. So we do have a communication problem, and I think that's from a wider perspective. I think we've improved. We really have improved a lot, but we still have a long way to go in order to be able to communicate. And this goes back to a different panel I was in yesterday, where I talked about understanding the value of shipping to individual national economies. Then it starts to make sense. So let me give you an example of the Philippines. In the Philippines, the seafaring workforce, the global seafaring workforce, brings in $6 billion a year, right? But for that to happen, the Philippines decided to make a strategic investment in the seafaring workforce, right? So they understand how much they put in and how much they get out. Many countries don't understand that. So getting a better understanding of that, I think, would be vitally, vitally important. In terms of, I completely agree with you in terms of sort of the energy, because we're talking of COVID always brings down the energy a little bit, because it's quite emotive for all of us in terms of our personal experiences and so on. And certainly it was the same for seafarers, but I think we're also trying to strike a balance between celebrating the MLC, which is an unprecedented convention in many ways, as we mentioned, but one of the things that came out of the pandemic, if I can be really honest and candid, I'm sure Fab might want to add something, is how we have learned to work with each other as employer representatives and seafarers representatives. Just this sheer amount of work and the way we don't always agree. I should be very clear on that. And Fab will a lot of times, put me in my place when I need to be. But we work hand in glove with each other. We try and understand what the seafarers' concerns are, what our concerns are, so that we can then speak with a united front to the extent that it is possible, working alongside many different governments. Thanks.
If I can as well, just addressing one of the points which you made, will it happen again? How could we kind of prevent it? And we're hoping that the action to move to fly or to identify seafarers as essential workers will play a key role in preventing that from happening again and giving them the green light to traverse borders much more easily in a pandemic than we saw happen in this current pandemic that's just passed, and allowing persons then to return home as well as to leave their homes and get on board a ship in terms of being able to sustain their livelihoods. And I think that will be a win going forward, certainly.
Thank you. Max, I saw you nodding to panelists, so I wonder if you would have some words to respond.
Certainly the answer is continued discussion and communication between all parties, the social partners and governments, to take the lessons that we have learned from this dark period, and put in the legal framework that will prevent the same kinds of, if I should say, transgressions to take place again, should a pandemic take place.
Can I just add something to that really quickly? And sorry, I actually missed that point. I think you make an excellent point, Gail. Countries recognizing seafarers as key workers, absolutely vital. The only problem is I think we've only got about 60 odd that have done it. So that in itself is an issue. I think where we see much more progress is in this new World Health Organization convention that I mentioned, which hopefully will get approved next week at the WHO 72nd WHO Assembly, because then we've got a legal requirement within the WHO that says that the interests of transport workers and seafarers needs to be taken into account. They need to be able to disembark and to get on a plane and go home. So that's really where we are likely to see some major milestones if that gets through as well. Sorry that I missed that.
Fabrizio?
No, thank you. I try not to repeat what has been said already, but I think that the point that we have been looking at together with the colleague of the ILO and to a certain extent to the IMO is that the Maritime Labour Convention as it was during the pandemic contained everything, was the perfect match to address the issue. The massive challenge was that all those countries that has ratified didn't apply it. So I think that was something that we have been trying to address, and this interagency task force has been looking at what can be done in case something similar is going to happen, and it will happen in different shape or form, but at a certain point there will be something that will put a strain on the supply chain and the shipping. Just to say that I don't think it is a secret, but at the peak of the pandemic, there was an agreement between our organization and other organizations to ask shipping to stop completely, wherever they were, just to respond to the request from country that they wanted ships running and seafarers to stay on board to carry goods, but they didn't offer anything in return. We went that close to stop shipping, and you can imagine the effect it would have had. Only the responsible, let's say, mind at the time prevented that to happen. But in the future, we'll need to consider, because it's not been said, but many seafarers, as a result of the stress and uncertainty of during those year and a half, they decided to leave shipping. There are many that they have mental issues, and many of them are now doing something else.
Thank you. Let's yeah, please.
I have many questions, so I'll try and combine it as much as I can. You were talking about the fact that there's, Elio, I think you mentioned the fact that there's going to be this new pandemic convention, and I think I was working as a journalist at the time during the pandemic, and I remember there was complications in whether or not seafarers could be declared abandoned because the MLC was suspended in many cases, seafarers weren't receiving any support, but they couldn't officially be declared abandoned because they were still technically in port, and there was communication kind of happening and things like that. But there's been a discussion of the IMO finalizing new guidelines for the seafarer abandonment database. I know that there's new conventions coming into force in December that are talking about repatriation. I was wondering if you could sort of expand on this a little bit and whether these new changes in policy are going to address those kinds of issues. also the criminalization of seafarers.
Yeah. Boy, you really did pack three in there. Yeah, okay, I can try and be brief. So on abandonment, in Geneva in 2022, we had a meeting to deal with this, to address seafarer abandonment, and we agreed specific guidelines on that. One, what we agreed most recently, so those have already been adopted jointly by the International Maritime Organization and the International Labour Organization. What we've agreed more recently is that we need data. Because like with anything, data is key, right, if you're going to solve something. So we've agreed, following a proposal by ICS and ITF at the International Maritime Organization, we've agreed that we need to look at the existing database that IMO and ILO have on abandonment, to take a look at the parameters and what we can glean from that. For example, looking at regions, we can learn a little bit better about what regions this is happening, and then hopefully that will inform how we address that going forward. Looking at fair treatment of seafarers. Now, I did say this is an exciting career, but we have a lot of work to do. So we've been talking about COVID and all the challenges that came with that, but unfortunately, fair treatment of seafarers is still a real serious issue. So if a ship calls to a port, any particular port, and let's say for argument's sake, drugs are found on board, for example, the captain will be held liable for that, right? And what our biggest concern is that those seafarers that are held are usually found guilty before any due process, basically. So this is something that we've been working hard for a very long time, because no seafarer should be put in those positions. Everybody is entitled to due process. And the people that we look at to basically help transport 90% of absolutely everything should absolutely deserve due process, just like you and I do. And we should not be fighting so hard to make this happen. But again, under the leadership of IMO and ILO, and we continue to work together in IMO and in ILO, where ITF actually is playing a significant role, where you have a representative coordinating the efforts happening there. So there's a lot of engagement, and we are hopeful and encouraged by the progress that we're beginning to see on that front, I think.
Thank you.
A few words? Just a very, very brief addition, and I think that if I'm not mistaken, already we have a date for a November meeting where the form ILO, IMO, government and social partner will meet together to discuss fair treatment. This is the third session of this working group, which is again a result of the pandemic, that the work of the two secretariat, IMO and ILO, and the social partner and government, we working together on some issue, and the fair treatment of seafarers will be the theme for this third group session in November this year.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we already went over time, and so we would like to wrap up. But since we just had interactive moments, we would like to hear once again from each panelist your final thoughts, having interacted. So I would like to start the reverse order. So I would like to hear from Max first. Your final thoughts, please.
Okay, thank you, Shingo. Yes, my final thoughts. Well, the world's seafarers are our unsung heroes, and they have proven this as they continue to move the world even during a truly dark period in human history. So we need to show our gratitude to them by not letting up on efforts to ensure the full implementation of their Bill of Rights the MLC 2006. We definitely have a long way to go, but we must also celebrate how the MLC facilitates the sincere collaboration and trialogue by seafarers, employers, and government. In the end, I'm very confident that we will get there and really keep the maritime the fascinating and exciting sector that it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Gail, please.
I'd say that seafaring is a growing industry, and we've certainly seen a rebound in the last 6 months to a year, certainly in this hemisphere. And it is to the benefit of all our economies. And on this basis, it's very important that the collaboration continues in that tripartite vein to ensure that all the stakeholders come to the table and are prepared to not just put pen to paper, but to take action and to commit to whatever's agreed. And until that happens, it would just be, as Jamaicans would say, a puppy show, all right? Nothing will be taken seriously. And until we have that commitment, then we are going to see possible recurrences of this at different and varying levels. So it is really getting persons to commit from all, whether it's port state, flag state, et cetera, to enforce whatever's agreed through the MLC.
Thank you, Gail. Elio, please.
Yeah, I think we've heard all the statistics, how shipping transports over 80% of world trade and so on, and I don't really want to bore you with that, but one of the most important things that I would like us to take away from this is just the importance of those people that are helping to transport 90% of everything. And the MLC really is a testament to their work, right? And I should point out, what the MLC serves as is basically a safety net of global standards. So what we want is companies to be even working above those standards. And there are many companies that are doing that, right? But we want to see many more going above those standards. You should not be settling for the safety net if you don't have to. Right, so that would be the one encouragement. Let's try and go above and beyond. And we have discussions between seafarers and ship owner social partners about how we can, even try to go above and beyond in some cases. And I think that is one important element to really show seafarers that we care and appreciate all their effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Elio. Fabrizio, please.
Okay, thank you, Shingo. Now, today we have been talking extensively about the MLC in the context of the supply chain. But the MLC is a formidable instrument, but is a tool, is something that we should be considering using. I think that, and I think that John and Shingo, forgive me if I'm going to put work on you, but the opportunity to have the ILO regional coordinator office in the region should be an encouragement for the region to look how to utilize the opportunity to have the ILO around. The MLC is an instrument, and there are others. For women, there's been a discussion on how progress the women work and ability to find a job for them in the industry. So there are different instruments, and I know for a fact that the ILO is always receptive to the request, but need to come as I mentioned earlier in my intervention, as a team, as a group of a country that they are aspiring to move things forward. The MLC, the sectoral meeting at the IMO should form the basis upon the request for more work in the region toward a better employment practices and job opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Thank you, everyone. And from me as a moderator of this session, I would like to thank you. We managed to have, I would say, a session of roti from a good shop. That is to say, it was rich. The filling was rich from start to the end, and therefore, therefore we went well over time, but it was too rich to stop in the middle. So I hope you had a good time, and so thank you very much for providing good filling to our roti. Thank you.